I decided to do a video on TileMapLayers because I remember when I started using TileMapLayers, I was confused as hell and I didn't know where to go. And I've noticed a lot of people say that your tilemap can look fine at first and then it turns to a nightmare as soon as your level grows. I guess tilemaps can get messy because everything goes on one layer, and what they have done since Godot 4.3, before 4.3 there was just tile maps and you put everything on one tile map and it used to get a bit messy. After 4.3, TileMapLayers seems to be what Godot is moving towards, and tile maps alone as a class is being deprecated. You still do tile maps, but you do it within the TileMap layer. Well, first of all, you notice I upgraded to 4.6 stable. So once it's after 4.3, I believe you can use the TileMapLayers. Let's start off a 2D scene, and let's name this 2D scene Simple Tile Maps. Just a descriptive name. And to make things simple, we're just going to use tile maps in here to make a background, because I just want to talk about a single tile map layer as a background for now, so we can learn how to use TileMapLayers. I'm using assets from kenny.nl. I'm just going to use a space background so we can understand TileMapLayers a little more easily. And we're going to use the Space Shooter Redux 2D. You can go ahead and download this. I already have this downloaded. And unzip and import to your project. And let's just right click on res and create a new folder. And we can call it artwork or art or something like that. Whatever you want to call it, you can call it assets. It's up to you. And just to make this stand out, let's right click artwork and we can set a folder color. I don't know, purple maybe. So every time we look here now, it's easy for us to recognize where our artwork is. And let me just pull up my folder here, and let's just drag the Space Shooter Redux into artwork folder. We can close this off here now, and you'll notice we have the artwork inside here. There's a lot more than we need. All we really need are the backgrounds for now. Open the backgrounds here, and I'm going to choose purple. You can choose whichever one of the backgrounds you like. Let's double click and see what they look like. It's a little space background with the stars. I'm going to use the purple. Of course, we can use it as a sprite 2D and drop it as a background here, but I'm going to use it as a tile map layer. Let's right click on the root node here, or just click plus on the root node, and let's search up TileMap. And as you can see here, at the end of TileMap, there's a red circle, and that says this class is marked as deprecated. So we don't want to use something that's going to be removed sooner or later. The next proper way to use tile maps is via TileMapLayers. So let's double click TileMapLayer, and there we go. We have TileMapLayer here. You can rename it if you like to space background or something descriptive. I'm just going to leave it as TileMapLayer. So if we click TileMapLayers here, in the inspector on the right hand side, you'll see there's an empty tile set. We are going to have to put a tile set there. If you notice at the bottom, there's tile map here, but there's nothing for you to work with. So let's go into TileSet and let's click where there's empty here and add a new tile set. Now that we have a tile set, we can click TileSet and I can expand it in the inspector, and we will see different properties that can be changed here. We have tile shape that can be square or isometric, half offset square, hexagon. All these are different shapes that you can use if you're using tile maps. You can change the tile size. You may be wondering what a tile map is. This is a tile map from one of the other Kenny assets, one called Tiny Town. And these are assets that you can use to lay out your town area. You have the ground with grass and dirt. You have trees. You have buildings. Each section of this map is a tile, and you can use these tiles to paint your game on the screen. Of course, what we will be using will be much simpler. We're just going to use a simple background, and we are going to make a tile map out of it. Okay, so now that we have a tile set, and let's go to the left hand side, under our file manager, and as I said, I'm going to use the purple background as my tile. Let's just grab the purple and drag whichever background you choose to use and release it in there. We can click yes, we can click no as well, and we can manually create our tiles, but I'm going to click yes. You'll notice now, let's just drag this up. You'll notice now that the background is shown in this area here, but it's split up into several pieces. And this is 16 small squares by 16 small squares, because when we automatically cut it, we told Godot to use the default texture region of 16 pixels, as you can see here, by 16 pixels. If we hover over purple.png, we'll see that the dimensions is 256 by 256. So what we can do here is we can change texture region. You can leave it at 16 by 16, but it's going to take a lot more work to paint it on. Let's just adjust that to 256 by 256 pixels, and you'll notice now it's one big square because the texture region matches the size of the sprite that we're using. Of course, we can cut this up into different parts if we like, but let's leave it at 256 by 256 for now. Let's just pull this down a bit. Now if we're going to paint this onto our screen, we're going to have to switch this to TileMap. So let's just click TileMap here, and you'll notice that it shows up on this other screen. And this is where I used to get tripped up. I didn't know what to press where to get my TileMap to work. We'll see our tile here, our 256 by 256 tile, and we can immediately start painting it on, but we'll have to select this. As you can see, we have a select tool here, a paint tool, and some other little tools. The line tool is where you draw in a line, a rect tool where you can hold and drag a rectangular area. You could also paint with the bucket tool, fill an area. You can use the picker tool. In this case, pick whatever tile you want and put it, and you have an eraser tool. And of course, you have these little other rotation and flip the tiles and all those sort of things, and you also have a place random tile. We'll use some of these a little later on. You'll notice the paint tool is on, but if we try to paint here, nothing's going to happen. And this always used to trip me up, and I didn't know why. It's because one simple thing. We have to actually select the tile that we want to paint. So you go in here in the tile map area and click the tile, and now you can see it's selected with blue margins around it. That means it's selected, and we can just paint on now like this. You notice that it's just painting wherever. So let's just click the erase tool and erase that, and let's use the rect tool and zoom out a little bit, and let's just draw a square around this, and you'll see everything disappears. Remove the eraser tool, and if we draw a rectangle around this now and drag, we'll get a full rectangle. It may not be exactly where we want to place it, but there's a way to deal with that. So let's press Ctrl Z and undo that, and at the bottom here you'll see there's toggle grid visibility. We can toggle that. You'll notice there's a little grid that appears here. We can use that little grid and start painting on, and you'll notice we have another problem here. Even though with the grid, if we use the paint tool and start painting, it's still not going to line up. Let's press Ctrl Z, and that's because we are trying to paint on 256 squares. That's the size of our tile set. 256, that's what we set here, if you remember. We're trying to paint that on the right hand side here in the inspector. You'll see the tile size is 16 by 16. So we're painting on a bigger tile on smaller squares. So let's just match the size now, and let's put 256 in the inspector here by 256. And you'll notice that the grid squares are much larger now, and this is going to make it much easier to paste on now. So if we just leave the normal paint tool and we drag across, we'll see that it fills a full square nicely. Let's undo that and see what happens if we use the rect tool and drag across. And that pastes nicely. But if you notice here, let's just save this and run. And let's just run this. But if you notice here now, on the run screen, you notice there's a repeating background. It doesn't look very organic. And of course I can leave this as is and move on with a more complicated tile map. But if we understand some basics with a simple layer, we should be able to apply it to more complex layers afterwards. Let's just go back to TileSet. Oh, there's an error here. This is an artifact left over. If you have this problem here, it probably is a bug with Godot, because our texture region is 256 by 256 and our tile size is 256 by 256. It's supposed to match. All these other squares here are probably artifacts left from when we had 16 by 16, but this was supposed to clear. So what we can do is reload the project. So let's go into project and click reload current project. Let's save and close. And go back in TileSet, and now you'll see all the other little squares disappeared. And there's just this one square that we're using here, which is the 256 by 256 that fits perfectly here. If we didn't do that, sometimes we get an error at the bottom here when we try to run. We're not supposed to get that error anymore. Debugger error, it says create tile, cannot create tile. Tile is outside the texture. You can go ahead and read it. We can clear this out now. At least now we know where our error is. And let's go back into the TileSet. And you'll notice here there's a little yellow exclamation mark. And if you hover over that, it will give you an idea of what's going on. It says the current atlas source has tiles outside texture, and you can clear it using remove tiles in the 3-dot menu. So let's just click the 3-dot menu and let's remove tiles from outside the texture. Let's save this and let's run. And it runs without any errors now. Great. We can go back in and start back painting. Let's go into TileMap again. And let's just use the rect tool. Of course, don't forget to take off the erase tool. Use the rect tool and just draw a square around where we want. Last time we saw a repeating pattern. Let's try to make it a little more random. So let's go into the tile map again. Let's remove everything here. And there's a little random button at the end here that says place random tile. It's not going to make a difference now because we only have one tile to work with. Let's draw it and we'll see what we're talking about. Don't forget to take off erase. And if you notice, we have the same repeating background. How can we do something different so that we don't have that? Well, remember, when we were making a tile set, we put it at the texture region was 256 by 256. And our tile size was also the same on the inspector here, which means it's just going to paste that one tile. Let's cut it up into pieces. Let's cut it into 4 pieces by halving the size of the tile. So let's make this half of 256 is 128 by 128. And let's make our texture region 128 by 128 as well. And if we zoom in here now, we'll see that we cut it into 4 pieces because half of 256 is to the center X value and the center Y value here. So we get 4 different tiles. And we can select all these tiles here by clicking Control and dragging across. So we're going to use all these to create our tile map. Let's go across to our TileMapLayer now. Let me just minimize this here so that our tabs here can spread out on the screen on the top here. Let's remove this. If we want to use the random settings, we have just one tile selected. We're not going to get random tiles, but we cut the picture into 4 pieces, and you can cut it into many pieces as you like. And let's just select all these pieces here by pressing Control and going across. So now we have 4 tiles selected, and let's start painting. Don't forget to click off the eraser tool. I'm going to keep the rect tool. Of course you can use the line tool or the paint tool, but I'm going to use the rect tool and draw a square across the screen. And because we cut the 256 into smaller pieces, it fits exactly in the blue box that we have here. Let's just save this and let's run. And as you can see now, in certain areas here it looks a little more random, but it's not random enough for me. So I'm going to close that and I'm going to cut it up into just a bit more. I'm going to go with 64 by 64, and in the tile set I'm also going to put 64 by 64. Enter. Don't forget to select all of these. If you don't, it's just going to use whichever squares as highlighted alone. Let's go into TileMap. Let's do the same thing. Select all. I want to erase this again. Remove erase again. And let's do this again. Now it's going to draw squares at 64 by 64. Let's save this. We can remove the grid to see what it looks like already. And as you notice here, it's starting to look a lot more organic. Let's run this and see what it looks like. So yes, this looks good. Let's close this off. Let's go back to TileMapLayer. Back in TileMap, and let's just explore some of these tools a little more. We have, of course, the selection tool, so you can select each square that you want and do something with it, or even draw a box around it. If you notice, when you select squares here, it's showing you which squares were used in making these squares here. In the preview area here, we see little squares surrounded by blue borders. If you just select one, you'll see there's only one selected here. We met the paint tool already, where you can just draw and paint wherever you like. Of course, if you use a grid like we did, it's going to plaster it nicely within that grid. We have the line tool. You can draw a line with the line tool, and it's just going to make a line with whatever you have selected here. If you have it random, it's going to use random squares as well. If you select all and you use random, it's going to use random squares for that line. You can zoom in and you can see what I'm talking about. When I just use one square, it was showing the same square over and over. So when I use several squares and use random tiles were used. Let's just zoom out and delete everything here. I'm going to use, let's delete that. Let's say we use the paint tool or the line tool and we created an area. You can now use the bucket tool and click within that area and it will paint it for you. Once it's in an enclosed area, you can use the bucket tool and it will paint. And of course we met the eraser tool already. We can just erase like this or erase using the rect. Make life easier. Well, these are self-explanatory. This rotates the tiles, flips them. If you use scattering, it's going to, as it says, it modifies the chance of painting nothing inside of a randomly selected tile. So let's just use the rect tool to show it. Let's raise the scattering to, let's put scattering to 0.5. And let's draw a rect across here. You'll notice that not all tiles are being painted on. There's some scattering of the tiles within here, which is nice if you already have a layer at the bottom. Let's say this is a map with water at the bottom and you want to put land above it. This will come in very nicely. Let's remove the scattering and let's remove these squares here. And if you want some more variety in your randomness, you can change these squares to half offset squares. Now isometric is a different shape and hexagon is a different shape, but the half offset squares keeps the squares you can offset horizontally or vertically. You'll see what I mean when we try to draw a rect here. So let's draw the rect and drag it across, and you'll see at the ends some are drawn in and some are drawn out. That's because it offsets the square below that halfway across horizontally, because we selected horizontally. And of course you can fill in here as well. And if we save this and we move in, of course we didn't get anything random because we only use one tile. My mistake. Let's delete this and go across. And let's select all these tiles here and let's do this again. So now we have random plus an offset. So if we save this and zoom in, you'll see that it looks very organic. Very nice background. Let's just run it and see how it looks. Okay, so now that we have some tiles in place, let's go a little more in depth into selection tool. So you're selecting an area and you can probably Control C and Control V, and you will see that we just pasted that selected area elsewhere. Let's undo that. Let's just change the tile shape back to square, and I'm going to select a small area, and let's take this small area and let's go into patterns. So of course we have to copy it, so Control C, and we can go into patterns, and inside here we can Control V and it pastes the pattern for us. And now we can use this pattern and we can use the normal painting tools and create an area of that pattern that we had before. Let's go and do that. Let's go back to tiles. I can talk in a little more in depth about picker tool. Let's click the picker tool, and with the picker tool again we can just press Control and click a certain area, and that's going to make a copy of that area in memory, and then you can just drag it across here with any of these tools again and paint it somewhere else. Of course, if you want a larger area, we can use the rect tool, and that's how you use those. You can go into eraser tool to erase, or you can right click in that area, drag and delete, or just right click a square and it deletes it from the screen. That's some basics on using the TileMapLayer. TileMapLayer has the power of adding different tiles, different layers, so you can copy this, paste it underneath here and just use whatever, and then you'll have another tile map there. TileMapLayers works in layers, so you can put another TileMap layer here, and each TileMap layer has a different function. Maybe it could be the ground, maybe it could be water, maybe it could be collision tools, maybe it can be collisions like buildings or trees, stuff like that, and we'll go a little more into that probably in the next video.